Hey there, everyone. That Sexy Nerd is back again. And we're watching another History Buffs episode already, which is great. I've never seen this one either, though. The Man in the Iron Mask, and I've been meaning to see it. I still will. If I watch this one, let me know if I do this video, know in the comments if you guys want me to do this video, because I've been meaning to do this movie for a while, just never had a chance to do it. But maybe I'll leave a straw poll in there. Maybe you guys could vote on it. So yeah, I don't even know. I don't even know. I just know the story that two brothers were born, and one of them locked in the basement with an Iron Mask who was actually the heir to the throne, and they're like, oh, well, I'm gonna pretend that, and the other guy died or something like that. I don't know. It's some stupid medieval stuff, but I love it. I love it, and I think it happens in France, but I could be wrong. Don't all the best medieval stories come from France, by the way? The only one that's kind of not even medieval, it's the Dark Ages, or the Dark Ages, the story of King Arthur. I mean, what other story does England really have except when they were not even the Vikings are their own thing, except we found out about the Vikings through the Anglo-Saxon chronicles, because the Vikings were illiterate and didn't write their stuff down except on the Jelling stones, which is typical, but whatever. I mean, a warrior culture only concerned with battle and murder and whatever. Yeah, they're not going to write their stuff down. They're going to ask for more beer. But yeah. I mean, like, seriously, the Three Musketeers, weren't they from France? This one, isn't it from France? And Joan of Arc. Well, Joan of Arc was historical, but still, I mean, like, yeah. I don't know. I don't know. I have to admit, I don't know too much about the story. I remember hearing about it in college once, but it was just a passing thing. I didn't really have anything to do with the academics. So, but anyway, let me not talk about it anymore. So let's just watch the episode. And remember, please smash that like button if you want to see more sexy and nerdy content, and subscribe if you think I deserve it. And let's do this thing, y'all.
Today we'll be exploring one of the biggest mysteries and culture phenomena of 17th century France.
Yeah, see? I knew it! Oh, I am the champion, my friend.
Based on the book by Alexandre Dumas, The Man in the Iron Mask.
Alexandre Dumas. Oh, is it the same Alexandre Dumas? Oh, wait. Is it the black guy? The black guy that Napoleon hated because, he's a racist piece of crap? That's another, what do you call it? Another dart thrown at Napoleon's frickin' face for being such an ass. I mean, again, as revolutionary and as great of a general as he was still a jackass.
Exploration to King Louis XIV, the Musketeers, and a mysterious masked prisoner. In 1698, a prisoner was moved into the Bastille prison. He was described as a man who was always masked, and his name never pronounced. Moved from prison to prison, he never stayed in one place for too long. He was guarded by French musketeers as he was brought to the Bastille, where he was locked away and kept a secret from the world. The prisoner died in Bastille prison in 1703, only 5 years after arriving. His clothes burned, the walls of his cell scraped down, washed, and left without a trace of his existence. His name never appeared in any records, and the death of this mysterious masked man captivated the nation. Just who was the mysterious man? Why was he hidden away? And why was his face covered by a mask? Stories of this man have made their way from history into fiction, the most famous of which came from a larger work from Alexandre Dumas, The Victim of Brajolaine 10 years later, written in 1857. In it, we follow the story of four musketeers, D'Artagnan, Athos, Porthos, and Aramis, and their connection with the masked prisoner.
That's Jeremy Irons, isn't it? Scar's back!
I'm surrounded by idiots.
This story has captured the hearts of readers and moviegoers ever since, including this 1998 interpretation. And over the course of this review, I'm going to go over the real history of the period and discuss the theories of who this person might have been. This is The Man in the Iron Mask.
But if they don't know, they said it was his brother, right? The son. That's who this is. Wow, I'm like Louis the. I always there's so many damn Louis. I always get them confused. For some reason, I thought this was. Look at this. Look at me. I'm such an idiot. I thought this was Louis the one who gets his head cut off. Louis the 18th, or so yeah, Louis the 16th. I thought it was Louis the 16th for a second, but this is the Sun King. The Sun King. What didn't? He's another jackass. Honestly, probably even worse than Napoleon. Well, yeah, even more useless because let's be honest. Kings back then were just useless. All they would do is just suck the money out of the poor and do all the depraved sexual whatever hell things they wanted to do. I know they're fascinating people to look at, but let's not forget most of them were just jackasses. All right, whatever. Cut that out.
The Man in the Iron Mask takes place in
I've been there.
1662. During this time, France was undergoing a lot of change. A famine had struck the countryside as crops failed, and
Again?
harvests came up short. Louis had only just come to power, and perhaps didn't know how to best handle the food shortage.
I am a young king. But I am king.
Also an arrogant jackass.
Known as
but,
the Sun King, Louis XIV was named King of France in 1643, although he didn't take over full control from his regent Cardinal Mazarin until 1661. He ruled as an absolute monarch, which is perhaps best explained by his own words, "L'état c'est moi," or "I am the state." He believed he had divine right chosen directly
Or
I am the Senate.
by God to rule over the people of France. Louis ended up not dealing with the food crisis and instead raised taxes over the peasantry to increase his treasury. Starved and angry, the peasants rebelled, as they often did in France due to massive social inequality. And in response, King Louis sent in the troops to repress the rebellion. In the 17th century, France had only three main social classes: the clergy, the nobility, and
everyone else.
Peasant, third social class. Parisian baker, third social class. Relatively rich merchant, but not landed aristocracy, third social class. As the clergy and nobility were exempt from paying taxes, this meant that the rest of the population were burdened to keep the crown afloat.
I just realized he's never done anything on the French Revolution. That is so weird. Yes, Napoleon, but no French Revolution. I know they basically go hand in hand, honestly. Think about it. You honestly cannot picture the French Revolution without Napoleon Bonaparte.
And the ones who predictably hurt the most were the peasants, the poorest of the poor.
Yep.
To make matters worse, the clergy and nobility often banded together and used their influence to ensure nothing was ever resolved in the French États Généraux, their version of Parliament or Congress. This blatant system of inequality did work in their favor for some time, but in the end they pushed things too far and tensions between the classes culminated in the French Revolution of 1789. If only the peasantry had been better looked after, then perhaps the whole thing might have been avoided. Why did Louis XIV need so much money from the peasants? Well, one of the reasons was to pay for his excessive partying. And I'm not talking about your average get-together, but some serious feasts at his Palace of Versailles outside the capital, Paris. The foundation of the Versailles Palace we know today was built by his father in the 1630s. Louis XIV fell in love with the palace and spent exorbitant amounts expanding it throughout his reign, including the gardens that make it so distinctive and recognizable as a piece of French monumental architecture. According to his memoirs, the young king wanted a large palace with an infinite number of apartments to accommodate women, nobility, and whoever else resided in his court. Louis firmly believed that Versailles and his beautiful gardens were a perfect representation of his power, wealth, and strength. But living this life of luxury really distanced him from the struggles faced by his people.
But as your advisors, we feel it is our duty.
Is that Hugh Grant? Not Hugh Grant. House. Yeah, that's Hugh Laurie. Isn't he British? Oh, but then again, Leonardo DiCaprio's American playing a Frenchman, so.
Yes, our duty to inform you that there are riots in Paris.
Oh, we don't care.
But Paris is the most beautiful city in the world.
Oh, of course it is. But if you take the money from the peasantry and treat them like crap, yeah.
Why should my people feel anything but pride and contentment?
Because they're hungry.
Of course, Majesty, I'm sure they are content and proud.
But they're hungry.
They are also starving.
No,
As
good.
the film accurately portrays, King Louis really wasn't that concerned about the riots. If you look through his own memoirs, you would find barely any mention of them. However, a letter from the Archbishop Fenelon to the king proves that not only were the people starving and in rebellion, but that the king must have known about it.
See, like, that's the thing. I've actually watched a couple of documentaries on him. Maybe I wasn't paying attention too much, but I didn't even hear anything about any riots. That's crazy. Or whenever people bring him up, they only talk about his whole whatever the hell he did. Like, why was this guy so revered again? I really don't understand. I guess we'll find out, but I don't understand why this man was the Sun King. Well, the only thing that I know is that he had sex with a lot of women. I could do that. I have done that.
I quote, "Your peoples, whom you should love like your children, are starving. Cultivation of the land is almost abandoned in order to make and defend vain conquests abroad. Instead of drawing money from these poor people, we should give them alms and feed them. If the king,
shit.
it is said, had the heart of a father for his people, would he not rather put his glory in giving them bread? Uprisings are becoming frequent. Even Paris, so close to you, is not exempt." Wow, that letter perfectly demonstrates King Louis's priorities. The movie absolutely nails his portrayal, because what money he didn't blow on Versailles and lavish parties, Louis spent on costly wars with the Dutch and Spanish. Despite the famine back home, his troops could always count on being well fed.
We have stocks on the wharves
Oh, this is during the 30 Years War?
We can distribute that.
But, Majesty, that food is spoiling. That is why it was not sent to the army.
Then you must hurry.
What an excellent idea, Your Majesty.
In the film, we see Louis planning his war against the Dutch, which did happen, but not in 1662. Louis's
what
conflict
a
with the Dutch started in
jackass.
1672, a full 10 years after the
hell?
movie. In fact, during this time, France would be fighting two
It's a
conflicts to
Skarsgård.
expand its territory, first against the Spanish and then later against the Dutch. In the territory above France, in what is now Belgium, the French, Spanish, and Dutch all claimed some of these lands.
Sigh.
Louis married Spanish
Never watched
Princess
that.
Maria Theresa in 1660 with the intention of solving problems between their two nations. With a Spanish bride at his side, Louis claimed that the Spanish Netherlands, bordering France to the north, should be his land by marriage. This was known as the War of Devolution from 1667 to 1668. After defeating the Spanish, he threw an absolute banger of a party in Versailles to show off the French
What a
victory
bastard.
and power over his rivals. And then a few years later, in 1672, the French broke a treaty with the Dutch and steamrolled them, an event the Dutch called the Disaster Year, in order to take more land in modern-day Belgium.
The attack will come at dawn.
No. Do not underestimate the
I
Dutch.
see so many actors here that I know now.
These troops will be cut off here, so shift them here, and then we outnumber them there.
The war ended with the French pulling out of the Dutch Republic to refocus on fighting the Spanish, but it was the beginning of a period of French expansion throughout Europe during Louis XIV's reign. So sorry, but the film got the timeline wrong. And while I'm at it, if the film is set in 1662, then where's his new queen Maria Theresa?
Yeah.
All we saw was a bunch of his mistresses, but no mention of his queen. Overall, the film does do a good job of showing us Louis' arrogance, his lack of care towards the common folk, and his designs to grow France's power across Europe, even if they got the dates wrong and ignored his connections to Spain and his wife. But how did he maintain this
To be fair, wasn't this kind of historical fiction?
power? How did he keep himself and his palace safe? Well, let's talk about the Musketeers.
Ah. Alright.
Alexandre Dumas became famous for writing stories about the Musketeers, an elite group of soldiers that served the King of France. The Musketeers were originally created by Louis XIII, Louis XIV's
Three
father, in
Musketeers.
1622, and they weren't officially disbanded
Oh! Is that Charlie Sheen as a musketeer? I never saw that movie.
until well after the French Revolution in 1816. There were many musketeers over the years, and 4 of them have been memorialized in Alexandre Dumas' works: D'Artagnan, Athos, Porthos, and Aramis. Alexandre Dumas first introduced these characters in his book The Three Musketeers in 1844, and like in his later book The Man in the Iron Mask, Athos, Porthos, and Aramis make up the traditional Three Musketeers, and D'Artagnan is introduced as a younger character that challenges our trio. And what's really great about Dumas as a writer and quasi-historian is that he weaves so well French history in his fiction, and I love me some good historical fiction. But were D'Artagnan and the Three Musketeers based on real-life musketeers?
Oliver
Actually,
Platt?
yes. Athos, played by John Malkovich, was based on Armand de Athos. The real Athos joined the Musketeers in 1640, but was killed in a duel in 1643.
Revolution! Open war!
Blood in the streets.
Porthos, played by Gerard Depardieu, was based on Isaac de Porthos, and fun fact, the real Porthos and Athos were cousins. Porthos joined the Musketeers from 1642 to 1654, and out of all the Musketeers in the movie, Porthos is the womanizer, although he complains frequently of aches, pains, and generally being old.
Stop praying and revel with me, Aramis. I need my spirits lifted. I'm old, I'm weak, my strength is gone.
I'm praying.
Aramis, played by Jeremy Irons, was based on Henri d'Aramis. He served in the Musketeers from 1640 to 1648, and in the film he's a Jesuit priest, although in the books he's more of a womanizer like Porthos.
Oh, really?
Ah, Aramis.
Your Majesty.
Yeah, okay.
You are a priest. But once you're a musketeer, I, like my father before me, have trusted you with the gravest of missions.
And finally, D'Artagnan, played by Gabriel Byrne, who was based on Charles de Batz de Casamol d'Artagnan. Although not in 1662, as the movie says, but from 1667 until his death at the siege of Maastricht in 1673.
Really?
Look at the faces of these men. How they admire and fear you. With the great D'Artagnan watching over me, who in France would be possibly such a fool as to try and do me harm?
A fool's blade can be sharper than his brain.
By 1662, in the book, the film, and in real life, the only musketeer out of the four that was actively serving was D'Artagnan. So while the real Athos, Porthos, and Aramis served as musketeers at the same time, although briefly, the real D'Artagnan didn't join until much later, after all three men had left or died. In the film, Athos' son Raoul and his soon-to-be fiancée Christine attend one of Louis's lavish parties.
Skarsgård.
Raoul wants to follow in his father's footsteps and join the Musketeers, but King Louis sees Christine and decides he wants her as his mistress and sends Raoul to die on the front lines of battle.
Wait, okay. Isn't that, it's the guy from Green Lantern. That's what he is.
Distraught over the death of his son, Athos storms Versailles intent on killing the king. He's stopped by D'Artagnan and the two take different paths. Athos wants to see Louis gone, and D'Artagnan is intent on serving the king and making him nicer?
I need you. All for one, one for all.
You cannot ask me to betray my king. I have sworn an oath.
When a king is dishonorable, you are removed from your oath of honor.
An oath.
And John Malkovich is doing his voice again because we're gonna have to call Nostalgia Critic in here to do his John Malkovich impression.
So in the movie, when I say...
Surmise how Nathan here feels about killing guards, and my own proclivities are well-known and often lamented facts of penal lore.
In the original script, it was... alright.
God, he's such a weird actor. But again, at the same time, I can't say I was bored. The glass didn't break until Doug pointed that out.
Is an oath precisely because it cannot be removed.
Why do you follow him, D'Artagnan? Why? What we fought for is greater than king or rank or reward. What do you fight for now?
I fight for the belief that every man can be better. Even Louis.
Splitting up from D'Artagnan, Athos, Porthos, and Aramis scheme a plot to replace the king with the Man in the Iron Mask. The Man in the Iron Mask, a legendary story about a figure who, during King Louis's reign, was sent to prison and forced to live with his face covered by a mask. Except it wasn't an iron mask, but a black velvet one. But regardless, nobody knew what he looked like, and to this day his identity remains a mystery. Voltaire, the French philosopher who was born during Louis's reign, was one of the first to write about this mysterious figure and popularized the idea that he wore an iron mask. In his book, The Age of Louis XIV, Voltaire wrote, and I quote, "The Iron Mask was undoubtedly a brother and an elder brother of Louis XIV. For Voltaire, and later Dumas, the fact that the prisoner was hidden away and had his face covered meant that his face was the reason for his imprisonment. And who better to hide away than the brother of the king? A credible threat to Louis's power and control over France."
You knew there was a man of such resemblance?
He is my brother.
Brother?
My twin. My blood. A fact which has kept him alive until now.
Fascinated by Voltaire's description of a man in an iron mask, even though it was wrong, Dumas wrote an essay speculating on his identity before writing his now famous novel. In reality, King Louis did have a brother named Philippe, but he wasn't a twin. Philippe was born in 1640, 2 years after his brother King Louis, and has a well-documented history as the Duke of Orleans. So who was the real guy if not a blood relative of Louis XIV? Although many potential candidates have been suggested, in 2016 Professor Paul Sonnino at the University of California, Santa Barbara claimed that after 30 years of research, he was sure that the real man in the Iron Mask was Eustache d'Alger. D'Alger worked for Cardinal Mazarin, who served as regent to King Louis XIV until Mazarin died and Louis came into power in 1661. It's thought that Cardinal Mazarin stole a sizable fortune from the King and Queen of England, a French ally at the time, and d'Alger blabbed about it. He was arrested and told that if he revealed his identity to anyone, he would be killed. Professor Sonnino also argued that the real man in the Iron Mask, who was actually wearing a black velvet one, did not have to wear the mask permanently, only occasionally. Anyway, back to the movie. Athos, Porthos and Aramis break King Louis's twin Philippe out of a prison island. This island was the Ile de Lorraine just off the coast of Cannes, and although the man in the Iron Mask was moved from prison to prison, including the famous Bastille prison, this is where he spent a decent amount of his sentence. Isolated and alone, the character Philippe spent 6 years in the prison until he smuggled out by hiding under Aramis's cloak.
Well, I'm a genius, not an engineer.
Aramis then switches Philippe with a strikingly similar corpse sporting the same mask and tells the jailer they should burn it because he likely has the plague. Don't ask me where he got the body, but in any case they buy it. After Philippe is rescued from the prison, Athos, Porthos and Aramis teach him how to act like his twin brother the king. And the plan is to switch King Louis with Philippe at a masquerade ball and hide Louis away, and then France would have a proper king.
We're offering you a chance to be king.
No. You're offering me a chance to pretend to be king. A king that you hate.
Not everyone hates him.
Don't you? Why should I become him? Until you give me a reason, I won't do it.
Philippe is right. We haven't given him a reason to do what we ask of him. Once all of us believed in spending our lives in the service of something greater than ourselves. Aramis had his faith, Porthos his lust for life, D'Artagnan his devotion, and I had Raoul. But we all had a common dream, that one day we would finally be able to serve a king worthy of the throne. It is what we dreamt, what we bled for, and what we have spent a lifetime waiting to see.
See what I mean? John Malkovich can be gripping. I guess that's why he's an actor. Yeah, why he's a good actor. Fine.
How dare you!
Ultimately, their plan is thwarted by D'Artagnan, and in an attempt to flee Versailles, King Louis and D'Artagnan capture Philippe. Athos, Porthos and Aramis don their old-school traditional musketeer outfits and go rescue Philippe from the Bastille prison. Meanwhile, D'Artagnan learns that Philippe is not just an imposter, but Louis's twin. And it's here that we learn that D'Artagnan is the father of the twins, as he's been in love with the Queen Mother for most of his life, and they had an affair almost 24 years ago. That explains why he put up with King Louis being so awful this whole time. Faced with this new information, D'Artagnan decides to help his old friends rescue Philippe from the Bastille, reveals that he's the father of the twins, and dies protecting Philippe from Louis. And thus our film ends. Louis is imprisoned in the mask and Philippe gets to rule in his stead and becomes France's greatest king?
The king known as Louis XIV brought his people food, prosperity, and peace. And is remembered as the greatest ruler in the history of his nation.
Yeah, what?
Brought his people food, prosperity, and peace.
He didn't bring his fucking people shit! He was the most selfish prick. I didn't even know that much about him. But I know for a fact that he was the most selfish prick ever to sit on the French throne. Like, God, he gives some of the kings of England and Germany some competition. Actually, no. Screw it. No, he was.
I don't think so. In the years after 1662, there were more famines, more hunger riots, and more wars. His territorial expansion continued into the 18th century. Even taxation got worse. The absolute monarchy that Louis so boldly exemplified was so resented after his exploits that future King Louis XVI paid for it with his head.
It's ludicrous.
Overall, despite being based on historical fiction and taking more than a few liberties to make the story richer, The Man in the Iron Mask does give us a good insight into the life of the nobility in 17th century France, as well as the Musketeers. The legend of the Man in the Iron Mask lives on, immortalized in fiction and film forever.
We feared the mask would destroy you.
I wear the mask. It does not wear me.
Well, that about wraps it up.
Well, that was pretty interesting. I loved it. I love France. I love France so much. I mean, I seriously, I love going up to French people and just talking to them about their history. I know I'm usually at the bar and we're supposed to be drinking, but still, like, I remember I went to Miami not too long ago, and the video that I showed on there, when I was in Miami, I was talking to a whole bunch of French people about it, and like about my experience with France and the history that I know, and when I actually went there, which was like one of the best trips I've ever taken in my life. So I mean, anybody else been to France, or anybody else recommend any different historical movies, historical fiction? Should I watch The Three Musketeers or The Man in the Iron Mask? Let me know in the comments below. And remember, please smash that like button if you want to see more sexy and nerdy content, and subscribe if you think I deserve it. And I'll see you on the next video.